And let's go ahead and dive in. So my name is Zach Snyder, and I'm a program manager at the nonprofit Solar Oregon. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. This is our How to Go Solar and Storage webinar. It's an event that we put on at least once a month. It's for home and business owners who are considering going solar, who want to learn about the technology, the incentives, and the process of going solar or adding battery storage to their home or business. So if that's you, you're in the right place. We split this up into several sections. We're going to talk first about how solar works. We'll give an overview of a solar system, its components, how net metering works. Then we'll talk about everything about your home, your business, your site that can affect whether it's going to be easy for you to go solar or more difficult. Then we're going to take a look at a hot topic, which is energy storage, and that is a battery so that you can use the power when the grid goes down. We'll then talk about the available incentives, and we'll run through an example budget for a solar system. And then we'll cap off with information on how to select a contractor and how to get started actually installing solar. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. That's one of my favorite parts of this webinar. I am here to answer all of your questions about solar. And so any questions you have, I'll make a note about the Q&A in a second. But that's a big part of what we're here to do today. So Solar Oregon's been around for the past 43 years. I've been here for the past 3 years. Like I said, we work to increase the adoption of solar through education about how to go solar, how to do that in a way that works well for you. We also do outreach. We run campaigns like Solarize campaigns. We just did one in Hood River County, which was a great experience just over the past few months. We have our How to Go Solar and Storage webinars. We also do solar tours, and we have other educational webinars and events on topics related to solar that are generally of interest to the clean energy community. We are a member-based nonprofit, so huge thanks to anybody who is a member. If you're not a member, you can join on our website. We really appreciate you and the support that you bring to our organization. I'm going to go ahead and drop a few links in the chat here. They're going to come all at once, and I'll refer to them later on in the presentation. But there's a link to donate there, so appreciate any support for our organization. There's a few upcoming events that we are going to kick off with in the new year that I just want to run through real quick. One of them is an event that's part of a series that's put on by some of our more technically minded board members and volunteers. And it's a little bit outside of our main programming. I'm excited for this next event on January 7th. It's Beyond the Roof. We have one of our Zero Energy showcases. This is part of a series of events that allows you to go to, take a look inside and talk with the builder or owner of a zero energy site. We do all sorts of sites that are zero energy. This one happens to be an apartment complex in East Portland. That's on January 11th. And we have an annual event that's a lot of fun. It's the Solar Wine and Brew, and actually this year, and Cider Tour. And we've set our date. It's going to be July 15th. And so tickets are available for that too, which you can find on our Eventbrite. I have to give a big shout out to Energy Trust of Oregon. Energy Trust of Oregon is another independent nonprofit in Oregon. They're very large, and they serve the customers of the main large utility companies in the state with all sorts of tools to help increase the efficiency of how people use energy, or to increase the adoption of renewable energy, including solar. Part of what they do is they support educational programming, consumer education, like Solar Oregon provides. And they've been doing that for a number of years. So thank you to Energy Trust for helping to support this webinar. And lastly, just a couple notes about how to make this as interactive as possible. Like I said, please put your questions in the Q&A box. We do have a chat box, and that's a great place to find links and just say hi to other guests. But if you have questions, I'm going to first look in the Q&A box, and that's a separate icon there. If you don't see your menu, you might have to mouse over on your screen. You'll see it. I'm also going to launch a couple of polls to get us started here, because I love to know who I'm talking to. And so if you would just take a second, this first one, I think I have 3, is just asking where you're joining from. And it goes more specific to more general on the list. So find the one that feels most right to you. I'm just going to give a couple more seconds for folks to answer this. All right, thank you for that. My next poll here is a poll about demographics. This is optional and anonymous, and it's a few questions long, and it's just to help us show our funders who we're serving. So I appreciate your responses on this poll. I'll give just another 10 or 15 seconds here. All right. And lastly, this is 2 questions, yes or no, and it's asking your familiarity with a couple of the incentives that we're going to be talking about. Both of them are provided by Energy Trust of Oregon. These are solar incentives. First one is their standard solar incentive. So that's a yes if you've heard of that, a no if you haven't, or maybe you're not sure. And the second one is their solar within reach incentive. So I'll just give a few more seconds here. Looks like you guys are pretty quick. All right. Thank you so much for that. And without further ado, let's jump right into our webinar. So we're going to talk first about how solar works. And the first thing I want to show you is this diagram of a solar system. You can see the little house here. There's the solar panel, which is labeled photovoltaic panel, up to the left of that. And solar is very simple. Sunlight strikes the solar panel. It produces a voltage of electricity. And it would be that simple, except that solar produces a type of electricity that's called DC electricity. And all of the circuits in your home use something called AC electricity. So in addition to your solar panel, you have one other little gadget here, and that's called the inverter. Or you might have a set of microinverters, but they do the same thing. And they convert that DC electricity into AC electricity. From there, it gets wired into your home electrical panel, where it runs through all the circuits of your home, powering your coffee machine and bread maker, and your lights and an electric vehicle, if you have one of those, charging in the garage. Any excess electricity that's being generated at any moment of the day, so say you're not home at the moment and it's a really sunny day, that electricity will go out through your utility meter and back onto the grid, where it can go and power other homes and businesses. When you are using electricity, but the sun is not shining, say at night in the evening, you will still be drawing electricity from the utility grid. It'll come through your utility meter and go into your home. There is a process called net metering, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, and that allows you to account for the energy going in and out of your home. In addition, when you go solar, your utility company will install what's called a bidirectional meter. They'll swap out your meter for a new one, because the legacy traditional utility meters only measure electricity flowing in one direction. This new bidirectional meter allows you to measure it going in both directions. That's pretty much it. Solar is very simple. For that reason, maintenance is pretty easy. Usually just clean the panels off, sometimes even just with a hose. Put your thumb over the hose, and sometimes if you can reach your panels with the jet of water, that's a great way to clean them off, usually once a year. Let's take a look at some of these components. The inverter is that electrical component that I mentioned that converts the electricity from DC to AC. And here are the two varieties. On the left, you'll see this white box, and that white box, the conduit that goes up to the roof there is coming from the solar panel. The electricity is being converted, and then it goes into eventually the electrical panel. This happens to be pictured on the outside of the home. Usually the inverter will be installed right next to the electrical panel. So that's your breaker box. And usually the breaker box is in the garage. So that's typically where inverters are installed. However, they are weather rated and they can be installed outside. Microinverters are what you see on the right. They are these little black boxes here. Obviously, this is a ground-mounted array, not a roof-mounted array, but that's what allows us to see these guys because they're underneath the panels. And they do the exact same thing as the regular inverters. The question might be arising in your mind, why would I get inverters versus microinverters? Some contractors prefer to work with one technology or another, and there might be slight cost benefits based on the size of your system to go one route or another, and that's something your contractor can help you to navigate. But the bottom line is they both do a great job and they do the exact same thing. Solar can be mounted in two principal ways. One is a roof mount, and that's what is done the vast majority of times, especially in urban areas where there isn't really the space for a ground mount. A roof mount is where the solar panels are mounted up on top of the roof, and we'll talk about your roof characteristics and things that might make that easier or difficult in the next section. But that's what that looks like. It's a great way to use the sunshine that's otherwise just beating down on your roof, maybe heating up your attic. The alternative here is a ground mount, and ground mounts are a great way to go solar if you have the space, though you should note that regardless, you are still going to have to run a wire from the solar panels to your electrical panel, and partially due to the cost of copper wire and partially due to the cost of trenching, partially also due to the cost of the mounting infrastructure, so the stand on which the solar rests. Ground mounts typically are a little bit more expensive, but they can be a great option. Now, I mentioned a system that allows you to account for the electricity that's going in and out from your home. That is what we call net metering. And net metering, the easiest way to describe it here, I'm going to show you what happens in a typical sunny summer month and compare that with what happens in a typical less sunny winter month. And so the graph on the left here is going to show the amount of solar you're producing in the orange bar. So you can see that's a very large bar because it's summertime, it's very sunny. The blue bar is how much electricity you're consuming over the course of that month. And you can see the green arrow here is the difference between what you're producing and what you're consuming. Because you're producing more, that is your net metering credit earned. So you've earned an amount of credit for that net metering month. Say that later on in the year, in a winter month, you are producing much less solar, but you're still using the same amount of electricity every month, and you're using less. Well, then you're going to have to, on the net, draw electricity from the grid and purchase that electricity. The great news is that with net metering, you can use the credit earned during the sunny summer months to offset what you need in the cloudier winter months. Now, the net metering year does not start on January 1st. It actually starts on April 1st for the two big utilities in Oregon, Portland General Electric and Pacific Power. This is the system of how you can store up energy credits to use throughout the year. You should note that any excess credits that you generate through the year, at the end of the 30th of 31st of March. If you have excess credits for that net metering year, they will be forfeited. So it's for this reason that it's in your best interest to get a solar system that meets but does not exceed your average annual energy consumption. We'll talk about that later when we talk about sizing solar systems. All of this amounts to savings on your electricity bill. And so one thing to note is that when you are interconnected with the utility, that means you have an electricity bill. If you use net metering, you are interconnected with the utility. When you get solar, the vast majority of people who get solar they stay connected to the utility. So you're still going to be connected. You're still going to get a bill. And there's going to be what's called the base charge. And the base charge is the amount of money that you pay just to be connected. That's typically between $10, $15, about, in this case, $12 or $11 per month. And then if you consume more electricity than you have credit, net metering credit to cover, you'll still be paying for that electricity. But in general, your bills will be reduced based on how much electricity you produce with your solar. So that's what makes solar a great investment. It allows you to build wealth over the long term. That's the basics of how solar works and the technology. Now we're going to move into a section that's going to focus on your home or business and aspects of your home or business that's going to make it easy or difficult for you to go solar. So the first thing I want to mention is system size. System size is determined primarily, first and foremost, based on how much electricity you consume. And that's for the exact reason that I just mentioned on the net metering slide. It's that you want to meet but not exceed your annual electricity consumption. Solar systems can range widely in size. So you can have a very small solar system, just a few solar panels, up to a very large one. It's an incredibly modular technology. That's one of the benefits of it. Factors that may limit your system size beyond how much electricity you consume might be your budget or available roof space. The average system size is roughly 8 kilowatts, and kilowatt is a metric. It's a unit that you're going to hear when you talk to solar contractors. It's kind of complex. It takes a while to wrap your head around exactly what is a kilowatt. It's different from a kilowatt hour. I would say just don't worry about what a kilowatt is right now. Just know that the average is 8. And the reason that that's important is we're going to talk about that when we go over our example budget later on. The next thing I want to talk about is how much sunlight you're receiving. So this is a little model of a home. You can see the compass rose underneath that with the cardinal directions. This arc, these two arcs over the home, that's the path of the sun in the summer and the winter. The main point here is that regardless of whether it's summer or winter, the sun is going to be in the southern sky because we're in the northern hemisphere. And what that means is that south-facing roofs are ideal for solar. However, west-facing roofs and east-facing roofs can also work great for solar. The only roof planes on which you consistently don't see solar being installed are the north or northwest or northeast-facing roof planes. Of course, if you have a perfectly south-facing roof, you can still be thwarted by shade-throwing objects like trees and buildings. And one thing to note here is that it took me a while to develop my eye to be able to take a look at a home and figure out whether a big tree right next to it is going to cast shade during the crucial hours when the sun is producing most of the energy for your solar panels. You may think that you're surrounded by trees, but it actually turns out that your home still works for solar. You may have a wide open sky, but just have that one tree that's right in the exact place where it's going to block the most productive hours of sunlight. And that's why it's always best to have a contractor take a look at it. They can do that really easily over Google Maps and get a sense for whether you might be too shaded, and then they'll come check that later when they come to your home. Another aspect of your roof that's going to impact whether it's easy to go solar is the complexity of the shape of your roof. So on the left here is an image of a roof that has a lot of different roof planes and they're very broken up. It's harder to put a solar system on a continuous area of the roof on this home on the left, even though there are sections that are facing south. And so it is possible, maybe you could put a few panels over on one plane and then a few on another plane. You're going to have to run conduit between those, and it's going to decrease the amount of solar you can put on there and make it just a little bit more expensive. Contrast that with a simple roof plane geometry on the image on the right here, and that is a south-facing roof. Yes, they do have one dormer over the garage, but there's plenty of space here for solar panels. Also note that vents, plumbing vents and other vents and chimneys on your roof can impede where you can put solar, and that's why you're looking for that blank roof space, typically on the south or the west or the east. Now, a really important aspect of your home is your roof condition and your age. There are different types of roofs. There are metal roofs, there are asphalt shingle roofs. This is an asphalt shingle roof pictured here. And they deteriorate at different rates. Roofs are rated to have a certain lifetime, and you'll pick your roof when you install a new one based on that lifetime in part. And the reason this is important for solar is that when you re-roof, you really can't postpone that, and you will have to uninstall your solar system, do the re-roofing, and then have your solar system reinstalled. That uninstall, reinstall of the solar system can cost up to, say, $10,000. So it is a big cost that you want to avoid or postpone as much as possible. Energy Trust of Oregon incentives require that you have at least 10 years of roof life for you to even receive the incentive if you are going to go solar. However, I would recommend that you have ideally at least 20 years of roof life. So that really means that you want to install solar. If you're looking at a typical asphalt shingle roof, you ideally want to install that within the first 5, maybe 10 years of the installation of the roof, depending on the lifetime rating of that roof. So really important detail, something to note. And if you are expecting to re-roof soon, it is best to wait to re-roof and then install solar. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the structure of your roof. And here I'm talking about the support that's underneath your roof. That's the boards. Here on the left, you see what are called trusses, and you have these vertical and horizontal support beams. On the right, you see an image of an attic where there are just rafters, just the beams going from the eave to the crest. And the image on the left where you have these support beams, that's very typical of newer homes. You'll have what's called prefabricated trusses. That's going to be just fine for solar. There's no concern whatsoever. If you have rafters, which is what you see on the right, your home could be fine for solar, but there's a few things that may trip you up. One is that you want to make sure that the rafters, this is something your solar contractor will come and assess, make sure the rafters don't span too far of a distance. So that has to do with the shape of your roof and how far they span. Your contractor will get in your attic and measure that, assuming that your attic is accessible. If your attic is accessible and you don't have roof trusses, you may unfortunately be prevented from going solar. If they can get in there and take that measurement, they can tell you whether you need, whether your roof passes local permitting requirements, or if you might need to have an engineer take a look at it. The contractor will arrange an engineer to take a look at it, but that can add around $2,500 of extra cost. On older homes that don't pass the code requirements, and this is particularly true in Portland. Portland is a very strict jurisdiction. In other places in the state, they're a little bit more reasonable. But if the engineer comes back and says that in order to obtain a permit, especially in Portland, you need to reinforce the roof, then the contractor is going to have to go in there, and add certain features that will reinforce the roof. And that can add several $1,000s of cost to going solar as well. And I would note that this is particularly true of urban craftsman homes, particularly in Portland, ones built between, before 1950, essentially. It can happen with homes that are a little bit younger, but primarily that's who is going to want to pay attention to this. That is a little bit of information about your home structure and site and how that is going to influence your solar prospects. Let's dive into solar plus storage. We're going to talk about batteries, and that is how you use power when the grid is down. So say during an outage, if you are equipped with batteries, you may be able to use some lights and some appliances during that outage. And that is what we call energy resilience. It's the ability to maintain your power usage when the grid is down. Solar is something that does not allow you to do this on its own. That's a really important thing. It's a common misconception. If you just have solar, but you don't have a battery, your solar system will shut down and you won't be able to use the power from it when the grid goes down. If you add a battery to that, then you can use the power when the grid goes down. And in fact, solar makes your battery more effective because it recharges the battery. The battery makes the solar more effective in that you can use it when the grid is down. And so it's a really great combination. That's why we talk about solar and storage. So there are a few things that can cause outages and the reasons why people think of energy resilience in our state. Most outages in just day-to-day life are caused by storms or squirrels. Just statistically, that's what's going to cause those outages. They're going to down a power line or going to chew through a power line. And those are the outages that typically last a short period of time, but happen more frequently. There are other things here I want to talk about. One of them is the threat of wildfires to grid reliability. And specifically, it's public safety power shutoffs. And this is what happens when there's really hot and windy and dry conditions, and a utility says, you know what, we're afraid that the conditions are going to increase the chance that our infrastructure, the power lines that are running through the forest, are going to spark a wildfire. And so we're just going to shut down a whole section of the grid. That is unfortunately happening more and more in Oregon. The first one happened in 2020 when we had a devastating wildfire season that year. But there were several this past year, and it's expected that that will increase in frequency. The cyber security is a risk for the grid in general. And in Oregon, we also have to worry about the Cascadia seismic zone. That's the big one, the big earthquake that folks are expecting at some point. And it's thought that power may go out in the Willamette Valley area for up to 6 weeks, on the coast for maybe several months. Obviously, that is wholly different from these other types of outages. It's a different thing to plan for. And the type of outage you're planning for does impact how your contractor is going to design your system. So it's important to think a little bit about that. Solar plus storage looks like this. On the left, you'll see an image of a battery here in the garage, right next to the electrical panel. And on the rooftop, you'll see solar panels, and that's all it is. It's solar plus storage. The way the system is designed, it's not simply just plugging in the battery or plugging in the solar. It's your contractor is going to design the system tailored to your needs that is going to work as a whole for you in the best way possible. A quick note on battery selection. There are many brands of batteries. There's not just one. So don't be thinking that. Most installers will prefer a certain battery technology. Many may only install one battery technology. So if you want to shop around for different battery technologies, you might want to shop around for multiple contractors and get multiple quotes. That being said, a lot of these batteries, the ones that are most frequently installed, are great technologies. You should think of this as first and second generation technologies. The battery industry is evolving rapidly. There's a lot of learning. But these are all well-tested, well-rated products that are being installed on an increasingly large scale. Another important thing to note when you're considering a battery backup is whether you want a partial home backup or a whole home backup. The reality is that one battery, which is typically between 9 and 14 kilowatt hours, if that means anything to you, is not enough to meaningfully back up your whole home for a meaningful amount of time. And so what happens is that a lot of people install one battery, but they do what's called a partial home backup, and it will only back up certain circuits in your home. So you'll have a conversation with your contractor, and you'll figure out what do you want to back up. On the other side of this is if you want to and have the money to invest in multiple batteries, you can achieve a whole home backup. There are people who do that in Oregon. But it does increase the cost of the system. If you are getting a partial home backup, the conversation with your contractor is going to, it might be multiple conversations. There's some details to work out, and there's two main questions that you might want to prepare to answer with your contractor. What needs power and for how long? And the conversation with your contractor that's going to determine your system design is going to be a balance primarily between these two questions. So the things that are most typically backed up are, say, a refrigerator to keep food from spoiling, some lights in common areas, and maybe some outlets to plug in a laptop, a cell phone, make sure you can work, communicate, things like that. And if you want to add additional appliances, say you want to add a television or you want to add a space heater, that can increase the electrical demand that your battery is going to have to meet significantly, and depending on what the appliance is. And so that will decrease the amount of time during which your battery can meaningfully back up your home. So just keep this in mind and know that you're going to need to plan a little bit to figure out exactly what you want. When you get a partial home backup and you have had the conversation with your contractor, you figured out which circuits you want to back up, those circuits are going to be the corresponding to the individual breakers in your breaker panel. And what your contractor will do is remove the circuits that you want to back up, take those breakers, put them in a new electrical panel, a secondary electrical panel called the essential loads panel, and your contractor will wire that panel up to your battery, and your other panel with all the remaining circuits will not be backed up with your battery. Then when the power goes out, the ones that are in the essential loads panel will still receive power. Note that the moving of the circuit breakers and installing the essential loads panel does add some cost to a battery installation. And so that's why getting multiple batteries for a whole home backup, even though it is more expensive, it's maybe more cost effective in terms of what you're getting, just because there's more labor involved in putting in an essential loads panel. But again, this is the most common configuration for a battery installation. That's solar and storage. Let's take a look at the incentives available, and let's talk about how much a typical solar system might cost. Now, prices have decreased markedly over the past decade. This graph shows through 2019. If it showed through 2022, you would maybe see an uptick related to COVID because of supply chain issues that arose during the pandemic. Additionally, during the inflationary period of this past year, the cost of solar has also increased for that reason. And so this graph is generally trending downward with a little blip at the end that goes up. And there is, of course, some uncertainty around inflation, as always, but that affects everything in the economy. In general, the trends decrease slowly downward as the technology gets better and the industry gets bigger. There are three primary incentives that you can take advantage of in Oregon. However, the middle one, which I'll talk about, is only available to people who are income qualified. So let me just run through these here and I'll explain what I mean by that. The three incentives, the one on the left is the solar investment tax credit. This is a federal incentive. It's been around for a while, but it was just recently reinstated at this higher level, this 30% rate in 2022. And that's going to be around for a number of years now. Again, at this 30% rate. That is a dollar for dollar tax credit. It's something that you apply for when you do your taxes the year after your installation is completed. And it's a great incentive. It can account for a large portion of the system, obviously. Just note that that's the one incentive that your contractor is not going to apply for and receive for you. You have to apply for it, or you have to have your tax professional apply for it on your behalf. The incentive on the right, so I'm going to skip over the middle incentive for a second, is the Energy Trust of Oregon incentive. This is their standard solar incentive. So this is if you are not income qualified, you get $500 for a solar system. Note that Energy Trust of Oregon has another incentive, which I'll talk about on the next couple of slides, called Solar Within Reach, which is for income qualified homeowners. So the income thresholds are relatively generous and it's a much larger incentive. The middle incentive here is through the state of Oregon. It's called the Solar Plus Storage Rebate. This has been around for the past couple of years, since 2020. It recently ran out of funds for the non-income qualified portion of the funding. But there's still actually plenty of funding for folks who are income qualified. So that's up to $5,000, but you may not qualify for it. This is the Energy Trust of Oregon income qualified incentive. And to give you a sense of whether you might qualify for it, the threshold, the income threshold for your household is different based on your household size. But for a household of 4, the income threshold would be $112,860. And this is up to $6,000 if you're a Pacific Power customer, or $7,200 if you're a Portland General Electric customer. It is based on the size of the system, but if you have at least a 6 kilowatt system, which is just a little bit less than the average size, you will max out this incentive. And so most people will receive the full incentive here if they qualify based on the income thresholds. So really great incentive. Make sure you keep that on your radar. Your contractor will apply for that and pass it on to you. The state incentive, the Oregon Solar Plus Storage Rebate that I mentioned, this is $5,000, up to $5,000 for solar and up to $2,500 for a battery. But the battery needs to be installed at the same time as solar. You can't add a battery later on to your solar system. Again, there's only funds remaining for low and middle income. This is a different income threshold from the Energy Trust of Oregon incentive. And so you're going to want to talk with your contractor to see if you qualify for this incentive. Let's get to everybody's favorite slide, because everybody's biggest question is, how much does solar cost? We provide this example budget in order to give you a general sense of how much solar costs. I'm going to run through this budget with you. You need to note, however, that the cost of solar can vary dramatically, and that is it's partially because of the size of the system, and solar systems can vary in size dramatically. In addition, your access to incentives can vary greatly. The additional cost of structural analysis or structural upgrade can increase the cost of your solar system. If your home is hard to get to and it's really far away from where your installer is located, that can also increase the cost of your installation. So please take this with a big grain of salt, but I'm going to run through this budget with you now. Excuse me. The budget here makes the assumption that we are looking at an 8 kilowatt solar system. We used to show a budget for a 6 kilowatt solar system. That's back when the average solar system was 6 kilowatts. And we've updated this budget recently. So this is relatively fresh. So 8 kilowatts of solar, there's no battery here, just the solar. And the first, let me go through the columns here. On the leftmost column, we're going to walk through line by line, and we're going to step through the stages, applying the incentives and applying the cost of the system. And then we're going to get down to the final cost. The columns here over from Pacific Power, PGE, Pacific Power, LMI, PGE, LMI. The LMI stands for the folks who qualify for the low and moderate income incentives. So again, those are different thresholds for the different income-based incentives. So you may qualify for part of the incentive here, but not all of it. So it gets a little complex. But first things first, if you know your utility, you know whether to look at the Pacific Power columns or the PGE columns. So let's get started on the first row here, the total eligible project cost. And we are going to make the assumption that the cost of your system is $4 per watt, which would make this a $32,000 solar system before incentives. Next, we're going to apply the Energy Trust of Oregon incentive. On the left two columns, you can see that it's the same rate, it's $500. And that's the standard incentive. However, if you are income qualified, it's going to be either $6,000 or $7,200. That's going to take this down to our net cost here of either $31,500 or down to $24,800. Your contractor applies for the Energy Trust Incentive. They also apply for the ODO, the Oregon Department of Energy rebate, as that state rebate. Again, funds not available for people who are not income qualified. But if you are income qualified, typically, if you're an 8 kilowatt solar system, you're going to max that out at that $5,000. So that's going to take us here to the out-of-pocket cost to the customer. This is what you're going to pay for the installation of your solar system. This is before the federal tax credit, but you can see that here, depending on your income status and also what utility you're in, it can be anywhere from, say, $19,800 up to $31,500. We're going to apply the 30% federal tax credit. You apply for that on when you do your taxes the following March, and that's going to be these values shown in this row. We're going to get down to the final cost of the installation of the solar system, which can range here in this budget from around $14,000 to around $22,000. Again, standard 8 kilowatt solar system, assuming a pretty simple installation. And this is a rough estimate of the cost. You will almost certainly receive a slightly different number on your actual quote, even if you have an exact 8 kilowatt solar system. So don't be surprised if you see a little bit of variance in the market. What you should do is compare quotes of multiple contractors and get a sense of what people are offering you. So hopefully this gives you a general sense of how much solar costs. One note here is that many people use financing when they go solar, and solar contractors often will partner with a financial institution, either a credit union or a third-party broker that might offer a financing product. Some people choose to use their own financing through their own bank. So a homeowner may attach it to a line of credit that's established for their mortgage. I would say approach that as you would with any other major financial decision. The interest that you pay on your financing is not eligible for the federal tax credit. So make sure that you know that when you're thinking about this. But it can be a great tool, and it can convert this big upfront cost to something that's a monthly payment that's much more like a gym membership and relatively manageable. So let's cap off here with how you get started, how you find a contractor, what's the installation process look like. So the first thing I want to say is that there are many solar contractors of different types. There are mom and pop shops. that have been around for a while. There are local businesses that operate only in Oregon, and there are national businesses that do lots of business all around the country. You can decide based on what your criteria is. I would recommend, regardless of the size of your contractor, to go with a trade ally of Energy Trust of Oregon. What this is a program by Energy Trust where they rate solar contractors. They rigorously qualify them. They track whether they're doing good business. If people have complaints, they complain to Energy Trust of Oregon, and that affects their star rating. So you can go on Energy Trust, and I'm actually in a second going to drop some links. But you can find contractors in their directory at energytrust.org and see all the Energy Trust trade allies in your area. There's also a great tool. One thing to note about the trade allies is if you want to receive the Energy Trust of Oregon solar incentive, you have to install your system through an Energy Trust of Oregon trade ally contractor. This is the tool. If you were going to walk away having bookmarked any piece of information from this presentation, it's going to be one of the links that I just reposted in the chat here, where you'll see the link is titled Energy Trust-Solar Bid Tool. Save that link. That is a link to a really great online tool from Energy Trust. You fill out a form with your basic information, your address, what you're looking for, your basic contact information. Energy Trust will connect you with 3 highly rated trade ally contractors who serve your area. And those contractors will reach out to you and offer you a free quote. So if you know you're at the stage where you're ready to get a quote for solar, this is the best next step that I would recommend. And finally, what does it actually look like when you go solar? How long does it take to install? As soon as you have chosen the right contractor for you, you've asked them, how long you've been in business, you've taken a look at, their reviews, maybe you've even asked to speak with a past customer that they've had and, gotten some information from somebody who's actually done business with them in the past. You've selected this contractor, you're ready, they present you with a contract, you sign the contract. When you do that, the contractor takes the installation from that point on. It's a turnkey service, and there's not a whole lot that you have to do. The contractor completes all paperwork, including permitting. They apply for your incentives, and they design your system. And that process of completing paperwork will take some time. You should expect that in many places around the state, that might take a few months, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months is not uncommon. In Portland, due to a very bad backlog in the building department in terms of making permits for solar, Portland residents, unfortunately, may experience a delay in permitting of several more months, maybe even up to a year. I've heard some bad things. Again, that's mostly because of the COVID supply chain difficulties and the permitting issues that are endemic to Portland, city of Portland in general. So expect that delay. However, once your permitting is acquired, your system is designed, and they get you on the construction calendar, construction of the system typically only takes 1 to 2 days. Many typical residential installations are increasingly completed in just 1 day. So it's pretty non-invasive in that way. The contractor will then have to do a little bit more jumping through hoops for you. They will manage your inspections, close out your permits, and swap out your meter through your utility with a bidirectional meter. They'll also schedule your interconnection with the utility. Once you are interconnected with the utility, which all of that process after installation may take a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so. After you are interconnected, your contractor will come turn your system on, and you'll be producing energy from the sunlight falling on your solar panels. So That is our webinar, our How to Go Solar and Storage. I'm really glad that you joined us today. I want to make a couple of notes, and I want to give a poll. This is our post-event survey that I would love your feedback. This helps us to figure out if we're effective in teaching you about solar. So we're gonna get to the Q&A. I will note that we got some great events coming up. Also, this webinar, we are in the process of developing an update for our 2023 market. I've included some of that information in today's webinar, and we'll have some more updates in future webinars. So if you did tune back in January, February, you might see some additional content on energy storage in particular. But again, we've included a lot of that today too. So thank you for joining us. Let's jump into the Q&A. Again, please put your questions in the Q&A box. I see there is one question here right now, which I'll get to, and then we'll see if any more roll in. I'm here to answer each and every question. So questions about solar generally, questions about your site, questions about solar in general are all fair game. Anonymous asks, are there project consultants available through one of the nonprofits that can visit homes and help homeowners with solar plus total electrification of our homes, including electric panel and wiring needs, including incentives and financing and pre-approved contractor supplies? That's a lot packed in that question. The question is partially about whether there's nonprofits that can help you with this. We're here to provide this consumer education. We don't do anything related to home assessments. However, there are some nonprofits like Community Energy Project that do help with specific things relating to home assessment, including electrification, say, of your water heater, but they particularly serve folks who are income qualified. If that applies to you, they could be a great resource. Again, that's Community Energy Project. However, I would say that the Energy Trust of Oregon Find a Trade Ally tool, the solar bid tool that I linked in the chat and that I was mentioning is the online web form. That's a great way. Energy Trust of Oregon is a nonprofit, and what they do is they rigorously qualify those contractors. And I would say that the solar contractors, they really know what they're talking about. They're at the bleeding edge of the industry, having all these conversations with homeowners, and they know what things look like on the ground. So I would say that that's probably the thing that's most aligned with what you're asking for. Anonymous asks, I entered late. You were talking about losing credits at the end of the year. Would you review this? Will this change? Yeah, so that was when I was talking about net metering, and I'm talking specifically about net metering credit that you earn when you produce more solar than you consume, and that energy goes out to the grid, and then you can use those credits later. That's net metering. That's different from the tax credits. So you're going to hear the word credit in multiple contexts in solar. So this is not about the tax credits. This is about the tax credit actually does roll over. So if you don't have enough tax liability, you can claim that credit over several years. That's just a side note. To answer your question, the credits that you lose at the end of the year are the net metering credits. So the net metering year starts on April 1st and runs through March 31st. And you will earn typically credit in the summer months when it's really sunny, and then you'll use up those credits in the winter. If your system is sized to meet but not exceed your average annual energy consumption, you typically won't have credits to forfeit at the end of the year. However, if your system is larger than your needs, say you just stopped using as much electricity, or you just wanted to install more solar because you wanted to produce more solar energy with your rooftop, even though you weren't going to receive the financial benefit of that, those are the situations in which you'll have credits that you're consistently forfeiting at the end of the year. But solar contractors, when they offer you a quote for a system, will match that to what your expected energy consumption is. They'll ask for your electricity bills. They'll do those calculations for you. And they're pretty good at estimating how much power you're going to need. So it's not a huge deal unless you make the decisions to have more solar than you need, essentially. I'm gonna stick on here. That was the last question there, but maybe there's going to be a couple more rolling in. Regardless, I just want to say thank you for participating in our event survey. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to the recording on YouTube. We have all sorts of other recorded events and content on YouTube, so I encourage you to check that out. I see another question here. Anonymous asks, does the battery charge fully first, then send electricity out on the grid? So good question. Batteries can be set typically in a few different modes of operation. And one mode of operation is that your battery charges fully, and then it just maintains that charge in case you have an outage and it doesn't cycle through. It just maintains that charge. And when the power goes out, maybe a few weeks later, maybe a couple months later, your battery is going to be fully charged and you know it's going to be charged. Another thing that your battery can do is to allow you to, if you have solar, which batteries are typically installed with solar, is to utilize your solar energy so you're not exporting that energy onto the grid as much as possible. And that is something that doesn't really have a financial benefit because with net metering, you still get credit for the solar that you put out on the grid. So you shouldn't think of it in terms of something that you need that functionality to get the financial benefit from your solar. But some people just like to use their own solar energy. It makes them feel good. And in other places where they don't have net metering, it does make the solar a better, more financially effective. However, you're counterbalancing that with the cost of the battery. I hope that answered your question. Maybe there's a follow-up here. Does the meter tell you what the exported amount of energy is? Yes, you will see how many net metering credits you earn on your bill. And so the meter itself, that's a really good question. And I would actually have to go check if the physical meter on your home displays the amount of exported energy or just the net amount of exported or imported energy. I don't actually know that, but I would expect that it does display that. I just don't know that offhand. And I am gonna wait here for another minute, see if there's any other questions. But yeah, I think we have some great events in January. I would just say check out our website and see what's coming up. Looks like we might be out of questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it. Thank you guys so much for joining. Oh, we have one more question. All right. Anonymous asks, where can we review this program? There was a lot of great info. Yeah, so like I said, the recording will be sent out. You can always rewatch. If you email me directly, which let me just put my email in the chat. I'm happy to send you a copy of the slideshow. There's not a whole lot of text on the slides, so some people like that, but that's the best way is to view the recording. So again, we're going to send that out to everybody. I hope this was really useful for you. We're here to answer your questions. So if you have questions in the future, feel free to either jump on a future How to Go Solar and Storage webinar, or to just reach out over email. And we'd love to talk to people one-on-one too. So thank you so much and happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next year.